Improv.
You went to University of Michigan.
Yep.
And you wrote, you started your own newspaper called the Anti-Daily.
That's right.
What was, like, back then, what was considered funny?
Well, I would read the Harvard Lampoon that the Borders books got one of. I would get that once a month, and that was I loved it, a little more cerebral. It's funny because I've figured out which friends from writing at SNL I was reading. There's a friend, Eric Kenward, who lines up exactly with my time at Michigan, and he was writing for Harvard Lampoon at that time. So, between that and The Onion, we were aiming somewhere in the middle of those. Onion is like the real hard joke headline, and Lampoon would be a more cerebral, interesting piece that had a funniness throughout it, and ours was somewhere in the middle and kind of messy, and none of us were trained in anything, so it was just fun.
What was the kind of fun? What was funny back then?
I
remember a story?
I've looked back. Oh, you mean around the Anti-Daily?
Yeah.
Well, I remember just being very stressed about that I was the final editor and having to cut pieces. And so one guy was always writing these long pieces that were just horrible. They were not only unfunny, but they were awful, and they haunt me still. There's one about having sex with a dead person in a rowboat, and the details were so specific. So it was just a study in what necrophilia would be like, and you're like, yeah, I guess that's what it would be like. That's awful. That's a horrible thing. And I'm not laughing, and it's long. It's longer than our whole issue, and so it's definitely cut. And the guy would get so upset at me, and I was like, I didn't want to be a comedy boss, but I'd signed up for it, kind of.
How were you a boss? I mean, you had to tell him, right?
Yeah.
So how did you present that?
Well, I remember the most fun thing, I didn't realize it, but we were doing like a Saturday Night Live table read, basically. We'd all get a case of beer and sit around. Everyone would read 2 or 3 articles, and there were like 10 of us. And so that was a real fun part. But then, the next day I'd probably email had just been invented, the list of what was in. And I just would see a lot of the guys were on the rowing team with me, and I'd see them at practice and be like, what about the necrophilia? Is that not going? And I'd say things that now producers say to me at SNL, like, maybe down the road. I think maybe down the road that we might have a good spot for that having sex with a dead body piece that's so freaking long. And then just never do it.
Improv.